joined by the host. Got it.
Beautiful. Michael Buettner, thank you for joining me on NRL Fans WA.
Pleasure, Jamie. Nice to meet you, buddy.
Yeah, you too. I'll give you a bit of a rundown of what I do with my pages and stuff.
Yep.
So, yeah, run Facebook, Instagram, all those sort of pages. I'm trying to promote the game here in WA. Trying to get more people involved, but also trying to get the NRL to notice that Perth probably deserves a team, with the 18th team coming up. So, just trying to get more people involved in WA, involved in rugby league and promoting this our great game that we love so much.
Good on you, bud. I think it's fantastic what you're doing over there. And I think there's a couple of things about WA. Obviously, they had a side way back when, but there's obviously some commercial benefits. There's clearly the TV benefits in terms of the time frame. So I think it's a real positive. I think about the game, and I know that the Bears are trying to get a side back in the NRL, and I understand all those things. But obviously, if I'm being a realist here, I need to look at three different areas. It's either going to be Perth, Brisbane, which they've already brought a side in, or New Zealand, I'd suggest. I don't think we need another Sydney-based team, and whatever that might look like in the future, maybe they might be red and black out in Perth. Yeah. That would be bloody awesome if that was the case.
Yeah, well, that's what I've talked to a few people about that sort of stuff. The last person I talked to about a possible merger team with the North Sydney Bears and Perth was Kerrod Walters.
Oh, yep.
And he went through the merger or the thing in Adelaide at the Adelaide Rams and all that sort of stuff. So he had a rough idea of what Perth was like, and the Adelaide Rams, being in that sort of not non-AFL or non-NRL dominated area.
Yep.
And we were talking about maybe that the to start off a Perth team again, maybe it would be a good idea to have a merger team with the North Sydney Bears. It gives the Perth players over here a pathway, which they don't really have at the moment.
Yep.
Then they go into the New South Wales comp, and it's a feeder team for the Perth Bears, and then they sort of split their home games up during the year, 50-50, North Sydney Oval and Perth, and both lots of supporters are I guess happy.
Yeah, mate, look, you could do a lot worse, and obviously there's plenty of steps to take in relation to that. But mate, I love the work that you're doing and the passion that you have for rugby league, which I think is fantastic. And hopefully, mate, if you don't get a team, hopefully you get a few more games over there at various stages throughout the years. Yeah,
no, I appreciate that, mate. Yeah, that'll be great. Like I said, our goal is to get a team, but just to have more games over here, more recognition over here would be great. I mean, we've got State of Origin this year, which is I'm going to that myself. So
of course you are, mate. Of course you are.
Yep. We'll jump into your career, mate. We talk about your career. Maybe a couple of little personal things or whatever that's gone on, and whatever you're up to these days after footy, mate.
Yeah, mate. Fire away, mate. I'm ready to go.
Ready. So you play 263 first grade games.
Yep.
You start off at Parramatta, go to North Sydney, join with the merger team with the Northern Eagles, back to Para, and then to the West Tigers as well. You get to represent Australia before you get to play for New South Wales. And you also get to play for New South Wales City as well. So, when you look back at your career, mate, is there anything that you've taken out of your career that's made you into the person that you are today?
Mate, I think there's plenty of things that all players can take out of their careers. And if they've got the ability to convert the skill set, and when I talk about, the discipline, the commitment, the sacrifices, the hard work, all those elements that take you to that level, if you can take those qualities into life after football, then you're going to put yourself in a good position, whatever that may look like. And I think that's probably what I've been able to do. When I started playing, my career basically went from as a 16-year-old playing second division with my mates. And I made the junior rep squad with Parramatta, and it was the first junior rep squad that I'd made. That was SG Ball.
Yeah.
The following year, I played Jersey Flegg. The year after, and at the end of that 1991 season, I captained the Australian schoolboys over to England.
Oh, wow.
Come 1992, my plan was, or my goal was, to actually just be a permanent starter in the under-21 side at Parramatta. As it turned out, 4 weeks into the start of the season, Peter Sterling does his shoulder. I make my first grade debut, and 263 games later, I've had a 13-year career, and things just happened so quickly. And I always say that there's three things I believe that you need to be successful. Clearly you need talent of some sort, whatever ability. That doesn't matter whether you're a mechanic, a carpenter, a professional athlete, a dancer, a singer, a musician, whatever that might look like. You've got to have some sort of talent in that area, right?
Yeah.
The second component, I believe, is hard work, commitment, sacrifices, and you can throw those dedication, put them all under one banner, and refer to that as hard work. And the third one, I honestly believe this, you need a little bit of luck and opportunity.
Yeah.
But the luck and opportunity doesn't come your way if you don't have number one and number two.
Yeah.
If you haven't put the hard work in, you haven't made that effort, you haven't sacrificed certain things in your life, then those luck and opportunities will go by you. And they still might be there, but because you haven't put yourself in a position to take advantage of them by doing the hard work and by being ready to step up, then I've heard plenty of people say, "Oh, things didn't fall my way," or whatever it may be. You know what? I don't necessarily, and I know there's reasons why that could happen, but I also go, you can also look back at what you've managed to do or what you haven't done to give you that chance, or to take that chance when it was presented to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, absolutely, mate. I mean, I was, as a junior, you talk about all that sort of stuff. Like as a junior playing, well, because I lived in Perth, I played AFL and cricket, and I made a lot of the rep sides. And as I got to sort of coming into the adult years of my life, I just didn't have the dedication and stuff. And I look back, I had the talent, I just didn't have the hard work and discipline to put myself through it. And I don't blame anyone else but myself. That was all my doing.
And again, mate, that's not a bad thing. Like there's going to be people that miss out, and that's okay. And both my sons play soccer now, and they play at a rep level. And I said to my son, he's 20 now, but I said to him when he was 16, I said, mate, I can assure you that the guys that you're playing with now, there'll be very few of them left when you turn 20, right? Life's distractions, all those other things that come into being a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid or young man will take you away from what they're doing right now and what they're focused on in terms of their sporting achievements. And that's okay. And I said to my son, I said, mate, you know what? If you're one of those, that's okay. It's no problem. I don't have a problem with it. Or you can be one of those ones that hang in there, make the effort, put in the hard work, and just maybe you might be still hanging around and might be one of those kids that opportunity does come about because you've been prepared to hang in there. And you know what? He's still playing reps at the moment, and he may not get that opportunity to play professional sport. Time will tell. But what I do know is he's giving himself the best shot, and that's all. And again, reverting back to your original question, what are those qualities? It's that mentality, it's that mindset, it's that thinking that I have that I've taken from my playing days that has enabled me to have or to be the person I am now, which I'm proud of. And I'm proud of what I've done in my career. I'm proud of what I've done post my career and how that all's played out. So mate, I think sport is a very good school, so to speak, in terms of life experiences. It teaches you resilience, it teaches you hard work, it teaches you teamwork, it teaches you how to win gracefully, it teaches you how to lose. and accept that, losing is a part of playing sport. Now, I don't like losing. I'm the most competitive bloke in the world. But I accept that, it's going to happen at times. And I know that as long as I've made the best effort I can, as long as my teammates have done the best they can, you know what? That's okay. It's part of life.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Mate. I actually couldn't agree any more with you, mate. That was, it's exactly right. It is part of playing sport. You're going to lose, but it's the way you accept it too.
Mate, it's important, and they're the skills that I think. I feel that with certain parts of society these days, and how it's about participation, it's about this, and it's about that. Like, you know what? Ultimately, we've got to teach our kids that, to win gracefully, to lose, and accept it on the chin. And it doesn't mean you have to get upset. It doesn't mean you're a poor player. It just means that you got to come back next week and do it all again, and hopefully improve and get better.
Yep.
And when you do that, then that's okay. Success isn't about winning or losing.
Yeah,
Success
exactly.
is about whether you are willing to back up and what that may look like. And so, again, mate, there's 1,001 lessons you take out of the game that I've taken out of the game that I think have put me in good stead, and I think have helped me, look at life in a way that I don't get worked up by too many things. I just go with the flow and just accept that's the way it's going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. With your debut, mate, you mentioned it before. Peter Sterling got injured, and you make your debut round 4 against the Roosters.
Yep.
How was that experience for you? Did you sort of find out early in the week that he was injured and he's not going to play, or was it sort of a last minute sort of thing?
Mate, I think, look, to be honest, it was probably around the Tuesday that at training I found out that I was going to be starting. It was way beyond my expectations. But I was very appreciative of the opportunity I was given by Ron Massey and Mick Cronin at the time. They put a lot of faith in me, and I hope that I was able to repay that to them. As it turned out, I played every game that season, the rest of the season, in the centre position. I was fortunate enough to also play the touring Great Britain side at the time, come over, and we got to play the Great Britain side over at Parramatta Stadium. There was 22,000 people there that night, and we were the only club side to beat Great Britain on that occasion. So, and that was actually the first try I'd ever scored in first grade, or at that top level.
Oh,
so
wow.
It was pretty remarkable season in that it was only 6 months earlier, or less than 6 months earlier actually, that I was overseas with the Australian schoolboys side, meeting Gary Schofield over in England, because he was, one of the top English players at the time.
Yeah.
5 months later, I am playing against him at Parramatta Stadium. He's part of the representative team for Great Britain, and I'm, a centre for Parramatta, just doing my best, and a young kid at that. So, mate, it was a great year. I really enjoyed it. Man, and again, mate, I never had massive aspirations when I was younger to become a first grader. I just played the game because I loved it. And as things started to develop, I probably gained some confidence, gained some belief, and suddenly started to realise that it may well be something that I could pursue. But, mate, I was 18 years and 6 months or whatever it was. So I was still very raw, young, and physically I was nowhere near where I needed to be to compete at that level. Like when you look at young players coming into the game now, they've been on weights for, 2 or 3 years. They've been through, physically they are ready, well and truly. It's whether mentally they can actually cope with the week-to-week dealings of the NRL and the demands of the NRL, which I guess from my end, I was pretty fortunate that I was able to do that. And also, the other thing I look at is that I probably played in an era where there were so many amazing players. When you think about that 90s, early 2000s, you know, I got to play with Brett Kenny. I got to play against Wally Lewis. I got to play with Andrew Johns, against Darren Lockyer, you know, Brad Fittler, Mal Meninga, Laurie Daly, Alfie Langdon. Like, you could just rattle these names, Ricky Stewart, Brad Clyde. You just rattle these names off, and they're just, you know, they're all legends, absolute legends of the game. And I, you know, I'm thankful that I got the opportunity to actually play alongside these guys at various stages, to play against them, and to test myself against them in so many ways. And yeah, for that, you know, mate, if I could go back tomorrow and do it all again, I would, without a shadow of a doubt, because it was a great period of my life, and I don't think there'd be too many players who wouldn't want to go back and do it all again. But I'm also satisfied and content that my time is done, and now I can sit back and just enjoy what these guys do, because they've got all these GPS monitor things now that I'm glad we didn't have back in the day, because it would have showed how lazy I was, mate. That's all.
Yep, absolutely. You know, technology's come so far with sports these days, not just rugby league, but sports in general, mate. So, you know, these players that have got the GPS, you know, there's nowhere to hide. You know, the coach knows, the fitness guys know where exactly what you're doing.
Yep, 100%.
Like, you know, you're mentioning all those names that you rattled off, mate. You know, and it's an absolute stellar cast of names that you listed off. You know, and I grew up in that era, watching, like, even yourself, like me myself. I remember you as a Bears player. You know, and it wasn't until the later part of your career that you went to Parramatta. You know, I knew that you'd played for Parramatta beforehand, but yeah, it was you at the Bears. You know, you got Billy Moore at the Bears.
Yeah, you know, mate, you know what? It's true. You know what? I had 4 seasons at Parramatta, and I was probably establishing my career. And I was in a side that, you know, we struggled. We didn't have a hell of a lot of success at Parramatta, but I learned a hell of a lot about, you know, accepting losing, about hard work, hanging in there, you know, making the effort at training. I went to the Bears, and I know I went to the Bears, and, you know, it was remiss of me not to mention some of the Bears players that I actually play with. And they're just as legendary as the guys that I mentioned. You know, the Billy Moores, the Gary Larsons, the Dave Fairley, the Greg Florimer, Jason Taylor, Matt Sears, Benny Eichen, right there. That's just to name a few. And again, I don't mean to be disrespectful to any of my teammates that I played with there. They were all fantastic players. That was a great side, and we were very fortunate we had the success we did. But I do remember signing with the Bears because I wanted to test myself. I wanted to prove that I could play and learn from a group of guys who were successful. And I wasn't convinced that I would go there and get a startup spot. So I actually went there with a point to prove. I went, you know what? I've got to prove myself. Despite the fact that I'd played 80-odd first-grade games, I had to prove myself to those players there that I was a first grader. And I think that mentality helped me have the success I did. I think the caliber of player that I had the opportunity to play with also assisted in me having the success I did. And I thrived on that environment because they were, you know, outstanding players. We had a great group dynamic in terms of our friendship and our mateship that we had. And mate, you know what? The 4 years I was there, we probably, you know, we made the semi-finals on 3 of those 4 years. Made the preliminary final on 2 occasions. It was, you know, we're probably, and I hate to say this, we're probably the unluckiest team throughout that 90s. Not to have won a competition, right? And, you know, you can say luck, bad luck, whatever it may be. It was just, you know, our time wasn't right, and that old fig tree curse still was hanging around in the 90s there. So it was a bit of a shame, but look, mate, I love my time there at the Bears, and I was fortunate enough to go back to Parramatta in 2001 and had you know, an amazing season there. You know, I look at the caliber of player that I got to play with, the season that we had. We, to this day, we're still the best attacking side to play the game in the history of rugby league in terms of points for. So that is something, you know, you hang your hat on. We went into that grand final against Newcastle as red hot favourites, but someone forgot to tell Newcastle, and in particular Andrew Johns and Ben Kennedy, that they weren't meant to win that night. And they just come out and blew us off the park. And to their credit, I honestly feel if we had to play them another 4 or 5 times, we would have beat them 4 or 5 times. But grand finals are about being ready on the day or on the night as it was on that occasion. And they were ready and they caught us napping and they deserved their victory.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And it's heartbreak, Parramatta haven't won a grand final since back in the 80s when Sterling and Kenny and all those sort of guys are there. I just want to get back to when you were at Parramatta at the start of your career. You're saying you replaced Peter Sterling. You played in the halves as well, mate. Did you learn a lot off him while you were at the club?
Mate, I've got to tell you, my interaction with Sterlo was very minimal because, and the reason I say that, for no other reason, but, mate, I had played SG ball, Jersey flag, right? I'd finished the 91 season playing reserve grade. And again, whilst we trained a little bit, it wasn't, mate, I was 17. I wasn't about to go up to Peter Sterling, mate, can you give me tips about this, that? Mate, I was just in awe of the fact that, I was training at Parramatta and I was in the reserve grade squad. Like, that was beyond my expectations. Like I said, I was 17 years of age, right? I had no idea what I was doing. Mate, I still remember the trial match. We played Western Suburbs in a trial match at the start of the 92 season. I was meant to play under 21s. The coach rang me up and said, mate, look, I need you for reserve grade today. Can you make your way there? I said, okay, no problems. Went to the ground. You got grown men, ex-first graders, beards, muscles popping out of their jerseys everywhere. And I'm like an 18-year-old kid who could throw around like a rag doll, right? I stayed out in the centres there. And I still, to this day, remember them just bashing the absolute shit out of each other, mate. I promise you. And I'm just, like, I'm scared. As it turned out, I scored 3 tries that day, right? And I think it was from fear alone of not wanting to get tackled. That's a simple. I just got the ball and ran. I was like Forrest Gump, mate. And that's as simple as it was. So, like, that was just, an example of how raw I was. And I'd started the season in reserve grade, played the first 3 games, and then that injury happened to Sterlo. And, mate, that was it. I was just basically brought up. And he went through the recovery process. Fortunately for me, I had another guy, another legend who went okay, Brett Kenny, who I learned a lot from. I got to play 2 seasons with Brett. And, mate, that was pretty damn good. I look back on footage, even to these days, I look back on footage of him in that Challenge Cup over in England, Wigan versus Hull. And, mate, you just look at him as a player and how, he's got a record in the game that I reckon won't ever be beaten. And that's to have scored 2 tries in 3 consecutive grand finals. Right? I just cannot see that being beaten. Right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I don't see teams making 3 grand finals in a row, let alone winning them, and one player scoring 2 tries in each of them. Right? It's just a phenomenal record that he has, and the quality of player that he was, mate, at his peak. There weren't many better than him. So, you know what? Like I said, I learned a lot at my time at Parramatta, but I still felt that I had more to learn as a player, and I think I had more to give. More to give, probably to myself and in my own head, that I could actually do it and have success. And I was able to achieve that once I went to the Bears.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you were around with the when the Super League and stuff, the ARL Super League war.
Yep.
How did you go with that? Were you tempted at any time to go sign with the Super League, or did you get offers thrown at you? What was the go with that?
Mate, you know what? Again, you said to yourself that you remember me as a Bears player, but the Super League thing should have happened around 95. Again, I'd played 4 seasons of NRL or first grade, but I wasn't really setting the world on fire. I was probably inconsistent in my performances. You know, I probably showed glimpses of brilliance, but I could also be very lazy and not, you know, make a hell of a lot of a contribution at various times in games. And, you know, once I learned, you know, accountability when I went to the Bears and, you know, later in my career, it made me realise how bloody lazy I was, you know, as a young player. But if you don't know, you don't know, right? These things have to be brought to your attention or you learn them over time. So I wasn't really in a position of power when it came to the Super League thing. You know, I signed, because I was with the Bears, I signed with the ARL, and, mate, it wasn't anything significant. It wasn't anything outrageous. It was just, you know, a token gesture, I guess. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, but it was probably what I was worth at the time anyway. Whereas I know that other players benefited, and good luck to them. They were obviously at that time, you know, valuable to either party. And good luck to them. They did well out of it. It was a shame that it happened in the game. But I'm glad that, you know, some 12, 18 months later, the game was able to come together as one again.
Yeah. Well, I think that Super League era sort of changed the way professional rugby league in Australia was done. You know, it went from, you know, guys having day jobs, you know, training in the afternoons and playing on the weekends, to the sport becoming a full-time professional job now.
Yep.
You know, so I guess Super League sort of pushed it along a bit faster than the ARL at the time was doing. But yeah, I think good came out of it. It was probably a shit time at the time, but I think some good came out of it.
Yeah, no, I agree, mate. And I think you're right about the professionalism. And I think as a game, we didn't really know what professionalism meant. It just meant players got paid more and trained longer hours.
Yep.
I think as years went on, probably 5 or 6 years down the track, we started to understand what professionalism meant and how to manage that. And, you know, to the point now where, you know, we're 25 years, 27 years into professional sport of rugby league, and you can see, you know, the caliber of athlete that is being developed, the skill level, you know, the conditioning, you know, these guys are absolutely phenomenal now. And it's a credit to them, and it's a credit to, and I've got to say, I thought with professional sport, I thought it would actually reduce players' careers because I thought the demands would be too high. What we've seen is the introduction of sports science and, you know, rehab and loading and all those things has meant that players can actually extend their career and have longevity if they're looked after and maintained, and which, you know, all the clubs in their best interest are aiming to do. So it's actually prolonged players' careers, I believe. You know, you got the likes of a Cameron Smith who played till he was 75 or whatever it is. And, you know, like, you know, he was phenomenal to play as many games as he did, over 400 first grade games. Mate, back in the day, 300 was a massive achievement.
Yeah.
Right. But he's cracked the 400 mark, and that is phenomenal in itself.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. When you were at the Bears, you know, and you sort of were, I guess, going under, whatever it was, you had to merge with Manly. How did that all situation feel with you guys as players?
Mate, it didn't sit well, clearly, because, you know, I know personally I didn't like it. I missed the first 2 weeks of training because I just didn't agree with the way it all played out. Obviously, you're trying to bring enemies and join them together. And it was always, I believe it was always destined to fail, unfortunately. As a playing group, you know, we got along as players. That wasn't an issue. But I think there was, you know, that rivalry that had been there for, you know, whatever, 50, 60 years. That's just hard to, you know, wash away and just go, okay, well, let's hug and make up and be best buddies. Right. Yeah. So that was the hardest part. Again, I got to play with some outstanding players there, you know, the likes of Jeff Tooby, Steve Menzies, Nick Kosef, you know, some quality players there. And of course, you know, the guys from the Bears who come in, you know, the debut of Matty Orford, who went on to, you know, win premierships with, you know, the Melbourne Storm, and all those things, mate. It was a tough time, but I knew that, look, that was just the way it played out for the Bears, unfortunately. Financial constraints, trying to move up to the Central Coast and build a stadium up there. which was their long-term plan, just didn't quite work out and proved to be the undoing, I guess, of the Bears ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah, no, fair enough. So you go from the Northern Eagles, a bit of a shitstorm of a team situation, back to Parramatta, and then you end up finishing your career at the West Tigers, mate. How was that finishing your last, 03-04 seasons at the West Tigers, for you personally?
You know what, mate, the first game I ever went to was Balmain versus West at Lidcombe Oval, right, as a young kid. The first dressing room I ever went into was at Leichhardt Oval, and it was Balmain. I was a Balmain supporter when I was younger. So it was almost me coming around full circle in terms of my footy career, right? And when I first started at the West Tigers, we trained at Lidcombe Oval, and obviously we played at Leichhardt Oval. And it was a great ground to play at. I was fortunate to go there. I got a bit of a lifeline from Tim Sheens, who'd come to the club, and he felt that he wanted some experience amongst a group of players who were very young, inexperienced, but had some go in them. Yeah. And I guess we saw his plan come into fruition throughout the 05 season, the season after I left. There was the likes of myself, Mark O'Neill, Darren Senna, Jason Moody, Scotty Sattler, who were all there at the time, offering experience and guidance to these young players. Four of the five of those guys that I mentioned, Mark O'Neill still kept playing, but four of us retired at the end of 04, and the West Tigers then went on to win the comp in 05. And I think a lot of that, I won't say a lot of it, I think some of that may have had to do with this experience and guidance that we provided to those young players, right? And mate, I'm here to say that I only spent 2 years with Benji Marshall, and unfortunately I didn't have a lot of time to teach him things, but the two things that I did teach him was how to step and how to flick pass. So
that's the way.
I think they went okay. I think he worked those things out okay. But again, mate, look, they were a good bunch of kids, the likes of Liam Fortin, Bryce Gibbs, Ben Galea, Robbie Farah, Benji Marshall, right? Scotty Prince. Those guys could play footy. They were just natural footballers, and they just needed. And I know, Robbie Farah, I heard him say on a podcast, or a friend told me that he said on a podcast that I was in rehab. Rehab a lot of the time I was at the West Tigers. So I think I only played 16 odd games from over that 2 seasons, which was disappointing on my part. But nevertheless, I spent a lot of time in rehab, and Robbie talks about the fact that he learned a lot from me in terms of my training ethic and what it took to get yourself back on the field, what it took to go, may not be playing this week, but you've got to get yourself closer to getting them back on the field as soon as you possibly can. And that's by working harder than the guys that are out there on the field. So those are the sort of things that I tried to instill and provide to the young guys. And, I think, it was nice to finish my career there. Again, I would have liked to have played more games. I would have liked to have cracked 100 tries. I got the 96. And I think that could have happened if I had have spent that time there a little bit further.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You get to play a couple of representative games as well, mate. Like I said at the start, you get to play for Australia before you play for New South Wales.
Yep.
How you doing?
There's my little friend.
And you get to play for the next year you get to play for New South Wales, and you get to play for City as well.
Yep.
Where do you sort of rate playing for New South Wales and Australia? Provided saying that you played for Australia before New South Wales.
Mate, for me, they were great personal accolades. But for me, ultimately, my goal would have been to win a premiership. That would have been the ultimate for me. But to personally have represented both New South Wales and Australia, mate, you know what? it's every guy's dream that runs out and plays NRL is
Yeah.
to represent their country and to do it at the highest level. I scored 2 tries on debut. And I
Yeah.
tell my kids I actually got held up for a third. And so I would have been one of the very few players, if possibly the only player, to play for Australia and score 3 tries on debut and have a 300% strike rate. But
Yeah.
instead, I've only got a 200% strike rate, which is still okay. I'll take that
Yeah.
and run with it, mate. And I got to play in that game for Origin, which was actually, the famous cattle dog game. I had Tommy Rodinis.
Yeah.
The game where Jamie Goddard, who was my Bears teammate, knocked out Jamie Goddard. Jamie Goddard knocked out Andrew Johns, and
Yeah.
there was that famous cattle dog story. So, fortunately for me, probably fortunately for me, I was on the bench at the time. So, I don't know what damage I would have done. Probably none, but nevertheless, mate, it was great to be a part of it. I wish I've had played more, and the only thing that stopped me from playing more games was my ability, and probably a hell of a lot of other good players, mate, ahead of me. Like I said before, you look at the caliber of player, mate, that played in those positions. I'm not embarrassed of the fact that, you're talking about the Ryan Girdlers, the Freddie Fittlers, the Laurie Dalers, you can just rattle off, Paul McGregor, Andrew Eddinghausen, you name it, they were all there. And it was, there was tough competition for positions, but I did get that opportunity. I'm the original one-game wonder, mate. 1 game for New South Wales City, 1 game for the Blues, 1 game for Australia.
That's all that matters, though, mate. 1 game's enough.
Yeah. I still got the jerseys, mate, and they take pride of place.
Oh, absolutely, mate. I bet they would. I was reading up once you finish your career, mate, that you went on to be a liaison manager for the NRL.
Yep.
What sort of stuff did you have to do with that? What did your job entail doing that?
Yeah, mate. Basically, what happened, when I had my injury at West Tigers 2003, I went and saw Dave Gallop and spoke to him about possible career options once I finished. And he said to me, "Look, mate, I've got a job for you right now if you want it." And I said, "Look, to be honest, 04, my goal is to get back on the field. I had serious knee injury, and my goal was to get back on. And I proved that I did get on the field. But I said to Dave Gallop, I said, look, if in 12 months' time the position's still available, I'd love to be a part of the organisation." So he kept the role for me. 12 months later, I started at the NRL, and basically it was a conduit between the playing group and the NRL. They hadn't really had anybody in that role basically ever. The last person or the last player who had been at the NRL was Mario Fennick, and he retired in the early 90s. So there wasn't really that connection between the playing group and the NRL as such. I also did some stuff that was heavily involved around the education and welfare of players. So there was, some really good initiatives that we brought in place, so that players could, once they finished playing, could actually think about what they were going to do in their career after that. So that was all about preparation whilst they were playing. And we introduced the rookie camps, which meant that we had these young kids coming in, understanding the pressures of NRL, understanding the expectations of the game, and, what they're expected to do as players and role models. So, it was a great role. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I was there for probably 6-7 years. Once I left the NRL, I then continued working there on the judiciary and then the match review committee. The match review committee I thoroughly enjoyed. It was a role that was, I guess, one of those things like a referee. It's a thankless task, but someone's got to do it. You've got to have thick skin. You've got to be prepared to make tough decisions. And, throughout my time in that role, there was plenty of, issues, incidents that had to be dealt with, and I think had to be eliminated from the game. The dangerous throw, the crusher tackle, high tackles, cannonballs, third man in, grapple tackle, all these things, the chicken wing, all these things that players try and do to slow the play of the ball that, involve the wrestling of the game. We had to identify these and, go about eliminating them as much as possible. So I think what you'll find now is the game, I believe, is cleaner than it's ever been.
Yeah.
Despite last year, the number of charges that went or that were laid down for players, I think we went too far as a game in terms of over policing what was happening in our game, and especially with the high contact, etc. The Magic Round was an absolute disaster with all the sin bins, the penalties. It was just dealt with so wrong, and I think that it's good to see that they didn't maintain that stance, because for the simple fact that I don't think you need to be consistent if things are wrong.
Yeah.
Right. It's okay to change things. And I think they had to do that. And I think we're starting to get the balance a lot better than what it was.
Yeah. I think that Magic Round, like my personal opinion was that Magic Round was sort of like the line in the sand, we're going to start from here. And they sort of relaxed it as it went on a bit further. But they've put down, we're laying the law down, we're in charge, not let the players and the coaches dictate to them what they're going to do in a sense. And the NRL and that just went nuts. So I think it was a good idea, but
I think they went too extreme. I think they just took it too far.
Yeah.
Because that Magic Round was horrible. We had games where, and I remember it was the first game, I think it was Brisbane versus Manly. I think it was Brisbane Manly. Manly had whatever it was. It may have been the Storm versus, I can't remember exactly, but whoever it was, they actually it was Manly Brisbane. Brisbane had 3 or 4 players sin bin.
Yeah.
And Manly just ran away with the game. Right? They were going to run away with the game anyway. But it just made it 10 times harder, the fact that Manly had so many players sin bin. And it was just one of those games that I just went, we've got it too wrong. It's too far wrong at the moment. But like I said, I think we're getting the balance right now, and hopefully they can keep doing that and allow players. Look, ultimately, mate, it's a contact sport.
Yeah.
I understand you got to protect the players, got to protect their head, but things are going to go wrong occasionally, and you've got to determine whether it's careless, whether it's reckless, whether it's intentional, or whether it's actually incidental or accidental.
Yeah.
And sometimes those things happen in our game that are incidental or accidental, that are beyond the player's control, right?
Yep.
And I know that no one goes out there intentionally to cause any pain or injury to players. I've been involved in this match review judiciary process for 12 years. There was only ever one intentional high tackle that I'd seen in that whole time. Right?
Yeah, right.
And so that tells you something. Of all the charges over 12 years, of all the tackles that were made, there was only one incident where a player was charged and found guilty of an intentional high tackle.
Yeah, right.
So that was over the 12 years that I was involved in that area. So, you know what? Like I said, the game's cleaner than it's ever been. It's good for the game. The guys are fitter and stronger than they've ever been, and it's bloody amazing. It's a good product to watch.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, absolutely, mate. Are you still working with the NRL? I was reading that you're the competition manager for the under-20s.
Under 20s, I did that for a while back in 2008 when the Toyota Cup kicked off. I've stepped away from that role, and mate, all I do now is I do the match review for New South Wales Rugby League. I've stepped away from the game, and it's probably first time I think it was 2 seasons ago I stepped away from the game, and it was a bit of a relief, but it was also sad because I'd been involved with the game professionally since I was 18. So, and that was nearly 30 years. But I've been in the game in some form, whether as a player or administrator. But you know what, if I was to go back and do it all again, I would. It wouldn't be a problem. But I just felt it was nice to get my weekends back. Nice to actually sit and watch a game and not watch it for
the wrong reasons.
Yeah, correct. For all the wrong reasons, just watching it to enjoy the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Did you happen to catch the NRLW grand final today?
Mate, I missed it. I was listening to it on the radio. Great to see the Roosters. They're coached by a local side, a local guy up here who I played Oztag with. I live on the Central Coast in Terrigal. So a local guy up here, he coached them. And we had a couple of the local girls who also played in the team as well. They did a great job, the Roosters girls, to have done what they did throughout the season. Fantastic. And in fact, really proud of their achievements.
Yeah, absolutely. They were in a sense, quite lucky to make the finals in the first place because of Brisbane beating Parramatta by so much.
Yep.
And then they go through and beat both Broncos and St George to win the grand final. I mean,
I go back to what
just
I said
that
before.
luck.
Luck and opportunity, mate. And they
Yep.
took full advantage of it. They've done all the hard work. They're taking advantage of it.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Have you got with all these kids, especially over here in Perth? We're like I said before, we're struggling a bit to have a development system. And a lot of kids. We've got a couple of the NRLW players that have gone over had to move over to Sydney or Brisbane to pursue their career in rugby league. Have you got any advice for these kids coming up that want to play NRL?
Oh, look, I think the big thing is to work extremely hard and to ensure that you are doing everything possible to give yourself the best chance. Because, mate, you know what? It's that triangle effect. The higher you get in this level of competition or playing group, obviously the harder it gets. And you can obviously say don't give up and keep trying and all those things, but ultimately that hard work, that dedication, that commitment, work on your skills. Take that time. I remember when I'd grab my sister and I'd think every first grader knew how to pass the ball left to right in a spiral, right? When I was 16, 17, I would grab my sister and I would just pass to her non-stop, bang, bang, bang. I'd just do all those little extra things. I'd go kicking the ball. I'd go, goal kicking. I'd go down the park and play touch footy. I'd go down and play tackle footy with my mates. But I'd also say this, that also ensure that you're trying to learn other skills in terms of other sports. Don't just be so narrow-minded and go, I'm just going to focus on rugby league.
Yeah.
Develop other skills. You could pick up your hand-eye coordination from playing basketball, playing tennis, playing other sports, playing cricket. You can pick up, your agility skills, playing footwork and things like that, playing basketball. There's a whole lot of different sports. So if you can broaden your skill set, then that is obviously going to help you as you get a little bit older and start refining and focusing in on that one sport that you really want to target. And I think the other important thing is your physical conditioning and ensuring that, that you are putting in those hard yards when it comes to doing the little bit of extra training, putting those, those extra sessions in that other people won't see you doing. Getting all the way to that line rather than that one step before.
Yep.
Because if you take shortcuts on the training field, you'll take them out on the playing field.
Yep, absolutely.
And it doesn't matter whether you've come first or last, right? And in particular, if you've come last, but you've done everything properly, then in yourself, you can look at yourself in the mirror and know that you've got the job done and that you can improve. And you'll see those improvements because you'll start beating those people eventually because your fitness levels will improve and you will be at that point where, you're not taking those corners anymore.
Yep, absolutely, mate. That's absolutely beautiful advice for these kids. Like I said, we are struggling to get people into the NRL over here, but we do have a few. We've got some guys, males in the NRL from Perth, and some females. So, hopefully, we'll get some more. I do want to just go back to Perth as an 18th team, mate. What do you think we should be looking at over here to maybe get the NRL to recognise us as a potential place to be?
Mate, I think you've got a couple of huge advantages over there. I think the fact that, the time factor is a big one from a TV perspective. That's a big one. Yep. I think commercially, there's some serious dollars over there. So I don't think that's an issue. And I think as a game, I think you've got the potential to grow and develop players over there. So I think there's plenty over there in terms of positives. Probably the hardest thing is, I know they've tried over there before, but it hasn't necessarily worked. but I can't see why it couldn't work again. And I think it could become a little bit of a fortress over there, especially for the home team, because the travel over there is tough. And you know what? Players will go over there and, set themselves up and base themselves there. I think there's plenty of positives for the game. And I just, if they are serious about putting a team in, I think getting the right bid together is essential. And maybe it is with the black and red of the Bears, who have already got 100 years of history, and they've got a foundation here. They've got a base here that you can tap into. You know what? It's not about reinventing the wheel. It might be about just being able to service and tap into something that's already there, ready and waiting.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, talking with Kerry Walters, and I talked to a few other players about it too, and they said the same thing. Yeah, it's just about, if we get the Bears, they reckon the Bears would be a great option. Obviously, the little minor details everyone would have to work out, but they reckon it's a great concept to do. I talked to Nigel Wangana, who used to work for New Zealand Rugby League, and he said that the second New Zealand team wouldn't work. It wouldn't work, not yet. They need a lot more development going into it first. Before it would work, and he reckons Perth would be the perfect place to go. But it's just, I guess it's up to the NRL, whether they see that or they put in a team in New Zealand and it fails, then everyone sort of sits back and goes, "Well, we told you."
Mate, you know what? I think the Melbourne Storm have proven that you can go into a town, right, and have success, even if it's not their game. Okay. And I don't see it any differently to going over to Perth. What I do say is that as long as you have the right people, okay, who are able to develop and create a culture, not unlike what Melbourne Storm have done, not unlike what the Sydney Swans have done here in Sydney, okay, it is doable. Okay. But it's going to take time. It's going to take patience, and it's going to take hard work. And I think that's just something that, if the game is prepared to accept that and put that work in, then, and especially the people of Perth get behind the players, then I think there's no reason why it couldn't be something that could happen further down the track.
Absolutely, mate. Have you got any personal businesses or anything that you're into these days, mate?
Mate, look, I work for Australian Oztag. I'm the director of coaching there. So I'm heavily involved with Oztag. I have a couple of big business interests in terms of a resort in Terrigal that I've got a share in, and I manage the housekeeping there. So those sort of things keep me very busy. And mate, life is good, mate. I live in a beachside suburb. Got a great group of friends up here, and life's good. I get to catch up with my footy mates every now and then, especially the Bears boys. Life is good, mate. And just pretty content with where I'm at.
Oh, that's beautiful, mate. I just want to thank you for coming on to NRL Fans WA, mate, having a chat with me. I really appreciate you giving me your time. You don't have to, but you did, and I really appreciate that, mate. Thank you from NRL Fans WA. Much love to you, much love to your family, and all the best with everything, mate.
Good on you, Jamie. Good luck, mate. You're doing a great job, bud.
Thank you very much, mate.
See you, mate. Bye-bye.
See you, bud.